Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of the Wet Work Podcast presented by Fish Like Hell. Today we have my good friend, Alex, and Alex and I are coming up on almost 10 years of friendship. If you've ever seen the movie Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, the best way I can describe Alex is he's more than a brother, but less than a wife. And today we're going to talk about USPSA, Steel Challenge, dive into some two-way stuff, a little bit of fishing. But I want to thank Alex for coming onto the podcast. He was very apprehensive because he's never even listened to a podcast before. So thanks, Alex.
You're welcome, Bryce, and thank you for having me.
Well, thank you for being on.
I would do
So
anything because we've had a classic bromance.
yeah, we've had that almost a decade now.
Uh,
We'll have to go like to Africa hunting something for 10 years. We got to do something epic.
yeah, definitely. 10 years.
Well, Alex and I met. We'll kind of get into the USPSA stuff later, but Alex and I met when I worked at a gun range back when I was still in college. And I was a range safety officer there. And Alex was one of our premier guests, if you will. And every time he would come before I worked there, they would roll out the red carpet for him. And I heard about him when I was shooting some USPSA matches up in Malabar. And I was told, there's only one kid my age that's shooting. And I'll need your help with this, Alex, because we never shot a match together, but there was one guy there that looked like our age, and he was Filipino. And the whole time, probably about a year or so, I thought Alex was Filipino. So when he was coming to the range, they said, Mr. Alex is coming. Everyone get ready. He's going to go out to the action bays and shoot. I'm like, okay, well, I'll go out there and meet him. And, my family knew him before I did. And
Mm.
I go out there and there's some white dude out there. I'm like, who the hell is this guy? I got to kick him off. Mr. Alex is coming.
Boy, I'm not even.
So we met when I worked at a gun range and he would come shooting. We'd shoot together. And then one thing led to another. But Alex is a grandmaster in USPSA in production, right?
Production, yes.
So, for those of you that don't know, USPSA stands for the United States Practical Shooting Association. And it's basically competition shooting with handguns. And is 3-gun under USPSA too?
Well, they did have multi-gun for a while
Yeah.
there. I don't know if they're still too active with that, but that usually falls under a different organization or rules. USPSA is primarily a handgun shooting sport, at least it used to be.
We'll talk about that later.
Talk about that later.
Yeah, that'll be interesting. But Alex achieved the highest level you can achieve, so that's why I wanted to have him on. That way, if anyone's interested about the topic, hopefully you could pick up a pointer or two, some drills, some gear, that sort of stuff. But the way it works is there's Grandmaster, there's Master, there's A class, B class, C class. And is there a D class or is it just unclassified after that? I can't
Oh,
remember.
there surely is a D class.
There is a D class.
Mhm.
Well, anyway. So Alex achieved Grandmaster. And yeah, that's why I wanted to have him on. So we could talk about that, what it took to get there, and who helped you get there, and if anyone else wants to get there, what it'll take. And then we'll probably talk about some two-way stuff outside of USPSA, maybe Steel Challenge. So, how did you get into shooting to begin with?
Mm. Well, I've always loved guns, even when I was a little kid, crazy about guns, but not really shooting. My family, they weren't really shooters. So it was sort of a late introduction for me because I wanted to practice things I couldn't practice at a regular static range. I wanted to be able to move and shoot and engage multiple targets. I wanted to have a little pressure just to see how it was. I want to be able to draw from a holster because believe it or not, most ranges in Florida you cannot draw from a holster in public range. So I ended up starting in IDPA, International Defensive Pistol Association. Shot my first match when I was 17 or so, and I loved it. I loved everything about it. I had a great time, and but I wanted something a little bit different, I think, than what IDPA had to offer. So I ended up starting a USPSA next because my gear worked. I had enough of the right stuff, and my first couple matches, they were a little bit rough, but I was fairly inexperienced at the time. And if I have one little tidbit of advice, I mean, get help right away. I mean, get proper training and not just taking a class. I mean, sure, that can help, but if you really want to succeed, I would say that before you even start shooting a match, I mean, maybe shoot one, see if it's for you, but go get a coach. It's tremendously helpful. Or in lieu of that, maybe an action pistol oriented pistol class. But really, I mean, it's just all about getting training early on because you don't really want to cement, training scars too deeply. And you will if you don't learn the right way first. So that'd be my number one recommendation. Get a coach. If you have one, find a GM class shooter, find someone who made a name for themselves. I could offer a few names for Florida, but that's the best way to do it.
Yeah, and I agree. And you got to have a solid foundation, and practice doesn't make perfect. Perfect practice makes perfect. But one thing I do want to go back a little bit. So if anyone's not really interested in shooting competitions, what Alex said about, shooting on the move, doing different things than you can do at just a regular static range. And by static range, I mean an indoor range or a range at a table or a bench where you're just standing and shooting at a paper target, no holster, no nothing. If you want to be able to be more proficient, if God forbid there's ever a self-defense situation, if you want to protect yourself or your loved ones, shooting at a static range like that won't do a single thing for you. Would you agree, Alex?
Depend on the situation, but learning how to control your adrenaline, even in something, just like a match, everyone looking at you, judging you, there's a timer. It's not apples to apples. It's not even close to the real thing, but it's something. It's not nothing. So learning to control your adrenaline that way, it's important. But the gun handling skills, that's important too. And you'll hear people say about how competition shooting is a great way to get yourself killed on the streets because you don't learn tactics or correct tactics. Oh, sure, that's fine. But I would say, for the average person in America, as long as bullets are in the air, there's hope. So learn how to shoot well, because marksmanship at the end of the day is what makes or breaks it, right?
Yeah.
If you're kicking down the door of a mud hut or if you're shooting USPSA target, I mean, accuracy is what matters, fast and accurate. So, and candidly speaking, too, I even feel like that argument's a little bit overwrought because if you're at a gas station at 5 a.m. and someone's attacking you, what are you going to do? You going to go find a concrete pole to hide behind, or you going to draw fast and shoot accurately? I mean, I think for most scenarios, you probably need more marksmanship than tactics, frankly, for a civilian situation.
Yeah. I mean, that's the one good thing static ranges are good for, working on your discipline, your grip, especially what I've seen at gun ranges. Unfortunately, a majority of just the average folks out there do not know how to handle firearms properly. Hopefully, they do it safely. But grips, trigger discipline, sight discipline, presenting the weapon, picking up that front sight in your peripheral vision as you're pushing out. Those are things you got to work on. But getting back to the adrenaline, if God forbid you're ever in a self-defense situation, your adrenaline's going to be pumping like probably nothing you've ever experienced for most folks. And that competitive the competitive nature in competition shooting, and just that, if you're a competitive person, you want to do well, you want to win, that adrenaline rush you get, that is probably the closest thing you can get to, real life situation, especially first when you first start off. I
Mhm.
mean, your adrenaline is dumping pretty good. But
Mhm.
IDPA is a really good way to kind of practice. What he was going back to is that, you know, slicing the pie, making sure you're going after the most advantageous target possible. So IDPA, draw from concealment, kind of conceal carry centric. USPSA is where you can just run and gun. So that's just my 2 cents about that.
Mhm. I would say USPSA definitely has a difficulty advantage. It'll make you a better shooter, I think, because you have farther targets, more difficult targets. If marksmanship's your game, that's what I would play.
Yeah.
Uh,
And then, with IDPA, they're a little bit closer. You do have, cover. There's a difference between just cover and concealment. But if you go too far past, I don't know if they've changed the rules at all, but you get a penalty if you go too far out from behind cover. You get a penalty for that. Do you know if they still have that sort of stuff?
no, thankfully they did add fault lines recently, from what I understand. Maybe not so recently, maybe a few years now, but it's less subjective than it used to be, and that was always a complaint that I had. Um, your score was essentially determined on who was ROing you, whether they thought you were utilizing cover well enough, or that whatever that kind of thing. Um, it's definitely a little more subjective, and that definitely I think contributes to the irritation that people experience when they shoot IDPA.
Yeah, and then USPSA and IDPA, accuracy does matter, but it's also timed too. So that timer probably adds more to the adrenaline rush than anything else. So not only do you have to be accurate, you have to do it within, you know, the fastest time, speed and accuracy. So if you're going to translate it to the real world, most people aren't in the military, most people aren't in law enforcement, but, it can help you, be able to protect yourself and your loved ones better. Or it's just a fun sport. I mean, that's why you got into it, and I got into it because I couldn't play baseball anymore, so that was my sport. I didn't play golf. I go golfing like once or twice a year, but I can't golf. But it's a fun sport.
Yeah.
It's a fun sport, and you know we'd like to preserve it. There's some controversy with the practical shooting sports world, but maybe we'll go into that a little bit later. Probably need a little bit more of that whiskey that you're drinking there if we're going to dive into that. But what kind of gear did you start off with, and did you transition? Why did you transition? Tell us about just first starting off, and we'll
Mm.
stick with production. And so everyone knows production, there's different categories. So, you can have single stack, which is a 1911, open, which are, most oftentimes double stack 1911s, 2011s with a red dot and a big compensated barrel and comp on the front. But production is just your average run of the mill gun you pick up out of a gun shop, put it in the box, and you can only load 10 rounds. So that's what you started with, right?
Mhm. It is. It is. So forget my phone. Yeah. So yeah, I started out with believe it or not, a Glock 22, Gen 3, which was a 40 caliber, full size service handgun, same size as a Glock 17. And I ended up switching to 9 millimeter pretty early on because you're at a little bit of a disadvantage shooting a full bore 40, especially if you don't load your own. Not a huge disadvantage, but when you're starting out, I think even small improvements can just help your mental state going into a match, and it's whatever. I switched to a Smith and Wesson M&P9.
Oof.
Uh, yeah, this would have been about 2012 or so, and
Well, we'll get into that later. Sorry.
in that later. Okay, yeah, M&P9. It was a reliable gun, just not very durable in my experience. Then I switched to an M&P9L, which is the 5-inch slide version.
Okay.
Shot that for about a year. And I remember I was at one of my clubs once and I was helping a guy out with his malfunctioning Glock 34 and I shot a few rounds and just it felt so right. Um, so I ended up getting a pair of Gen 3 34s, shot those for a few years, and those are great guns, really. And, but even though the idea of production is to be able to take a gun out of a box and go take it to a match, most people don't. And there is a bit of a gear race going on in production division, and recently Carry Optics, which I think has taken the reign there for production. But um, I end up getting a pair of CZ75 SPR-01 Shadows, and those are double action, single action pistols. Bottom raced up from Matt Mink at the time, and great triggers, 6-pound double action, about 2-pound single action. And that was a bit of a learning curve, I think, coming off of striker fire guns. They're easy guns to shoot for sure, but double action, single action is definitely it's an enthusiast trigger system. You have to work on it, especially that the double action to single action transition. And even taking double action shots on low proximity targets at the distance, that's can be challenging for a lot of people. I would say I was challenged by it, but they're easy shooting, generally speaking. After a while, I did get a little tired of it, though, especially if I was shooting some Steel Challenge, and for those of you who don't know, the Steel Challenge, you have 5 strings of 5 shots. USPSA, you can have a 32 round course of fire. So one double action shot at 32 rounds, it's not bad. I'll take that deal all day long to have 31 beautiful single action shots. But 1 out of 5 that's rough, especially if you're not super good. You don't practice all the time, whatever. So I had always had a 2011 itch, and finally scratched it when I got a pair of Millennium Customs, and I switched to limited division, and those were 40, because that's what you have to shoot in limited to make major power factor. Otherwise, you're just leaving points on the table. Production, everything's scored minor, and shot that for a few years. Those were good. I enjoyed shooting those. I enjoyed the 20 round capacity. I loved the triggers more than anything. Loved the way that they shot. They're great guns. Mine were set up, I would say, pretty closely to at the time would have been like an STI Edge, bull barrel, full length dust cover, pretty heavy slide, not overly light, and they shot well. And I dabbled in limited division for a few years, and one thing you'll notice is that the cost of everything is escalating,
Yeah.
and it gets worse. So after that, I really had an itch for something a little bit different because I wanted to have full-time customer service. I wanted a little bit of a different style of gun. So I wanted to go with the company, and that company had to be SVI Infinity, SV Infinity, Straight Void Infinity, the alpha and omega of 2011s, even race 1911s to this day. There are lots of competitors, Atlas and other brands, but nothing comes close.
STI, which is now
SVI,
Staccato.
it's all a bunch of
Oh
bull.
yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Private ownership. I tell you, there's nothing better.
Yeah. And for anyone that sees the not to go too deep down the rabbit hole, but the prodigies and the things like that, these don't stack up against an SV or even staccatos in our opinions. But and kind of getting back to what he said about the price escalating, when I was younger, we watched a lot of NASCAR, and for some reason, it still sticks out to me this day. My mom said, "Well, whoever has the most money in their car wins." So practical shooting, basically, whoever spends the most money and squeezes in the most practice, that's really all you have to do to get good at it. So
I mean, it's not really quite true, is it, though?
this is true. For the most part, we'll kind of get back to the production side of it. So M&P, you're shooting. You saw have someone having malfunctions with Glock 34s. What were their malfunctions, and how did yours actually run as far as the M&P is concerned?
My M&P, oh, it ran great until it broke multiple times. Um,
Well,
I mean that mine. I mean, I had very few malfunctions. I had an Apex trigger kit in at the time, just their standard production legal kit. Because at the time you couldn't have any external modifications. A pair of Savigny sights on it, and
shout out, Dave Savigny.
best sights on the market. And no, they ran great. I felt like they weren't as shootable. Part of that I think is the grip angle for me. There's a something I don't know funky about the grip. I feel like I can't get very deep on the gun, and they ran great, but I broke quite a few things. I believe I broke an extractor once, which I replaced with an Apex unit. That was great. I broke multiple strikers. I broke probably 4 slide stops. Um, just where your holster grub on the right side, it's an ambi unit. They break off. So not very durable in my experience. Smith and Wesson always took care of me on it. A very good customer service. Never had an issue there, but I prefer to shoot guns that don't break regularly. So yeah.
And I do want to highlight, we have to remember Alex did make it to Grandmaster. So the amount of rounds you were putting through that gun, most people won't come close to. And that's one of the things it does take to get to Grandmaster. But, for the most part, most guns are, well, I won't say most guns, SIG, HK, Glock, Smith and Wesson, for the most part, they run pretty well. Some do run more consistently than others, but we'll probably get into that later
Right.
after a couple more drinks. We'll go deep down that rabbit hole. But so you had
Yeah, I
decent.
would, I was shooting a lot, but I
How
was
many
keep
how many rounds would you say you had on that gun before you even thought of switching to a Glock?
only 19,000 or so, not many. I had 4 of them, but my main training gun had 19,000 rounds on it, maybe a little over. Could check my log. And on that gun, I did lose probably, it had been 4 strikers and 3 or 4 slide stops. So yeah, it was kind of a terrible um, breakage rate, frankly, for the round count. I would expect nothing to break that early on a normal gun. People say they weren't accurate. I don't know if they've improved since then. I personally never noticed that it was accurate enough for what I did. Um, Not my favorite.
The only gun I ever noticed an inherent accuracy issue would probably be the Springfield XD, whatever it is, mod 2. I don't even know what it is, to be honest with you, because I won't touch a Springfield. But that's just me. But so you saw the guy having malfunction issues with the Glock. What issues was he having with that? If you can
Oh,
remember.
I can't remember. It was so long ago now, but
And then as far as the rest of your rig, so yes, you have to obviously have a handgun to shoot USPSA and SEAL Challenge. What about, belt, holster, mag pouches? What was your setup as far as that's concerned?
I started out mostly with it would have been a Sierra Speed rig way back then, and they're good. I mean, you want a double belt system. You want, something that's very rigid to support your rig. You want a nice holster that's preferably dropped and offset, so it's easier to draw.
And what he
And
means by a double belt, sorry to interrupt, a double belt, you'll put a Velcro belt on first. The outside is Velcro. That way you can stick your outer belt to that Velcro belt, and then you basically clip it on. And by the offset holster with a drop, basically it doesn't stay on your belt up against your love handles if you got them. It sticks out and kind of cants outward, so it's easier to grab. But I'm sorry to interrupt you. Go ahead, Alex.
the point is, it clears your love handles. Very important.
Yes.
Uh,
So
we're
you
all
had
we're all fat, so um, it's got to clear that. And yeah, what I used to, I switched to Double Alpha after a while. Great company, great products, belt's nice and stiff, and good mag pouches. I like their mag pouches, fit the belts well. Just get them from the same company. Things tend to work out better when you just get things from the same company. Like Comptac holsters, always throw them on Ben Stoker's dropped and offset hanger, boss
yeah,
hanger.
shout out Ben Stoker.
Not too loud.
Yeah. Uh,
It's a great product though.
yes, it is a great
Can't
product.
hear you have success.
Yeah, and everyone should go follow him on Instagram and all the socials. And Dave Savigny too. We'll just do a bunch of shout outs and get nothing out of it. No one will listen to this anyway, so
It's just us. None of our team. Seriously. Where? Jesus Christ.
And then as far as magazines are concerned, how many mags did you typically run on your belt at one time?
I would always do five pouches. So I'd have one in the gun, five on the belt. But then that was overkill. You don't really need that many. Um, you know, as a mutual acquaintance to say you don't like your run raft a fucking S vest on or something at the range. So just do four and load the first one out of your pocket.
Yeah.
You're in production, load off your back one, put it back, and then load the full one in your pocket. That's all you need.
And when you switched to the Glock, how was your experience with that gun? How many rounds did you put through it before you had an issue?
Well, my first Glock 34 that I had, it was a bad vintage. It's a weird excuse, but it was. There was about a 2 year period there where there was some weird screwed up Glocks going on. It was about 2011 to 2013, give or take. Um, Never did figure it out, but it always had extraction issues. It always had ejection issues. And I changed out the ejectors and the extractors, and it took quite a little bit of finagling to get it to run correctly. Um, Never had that issue with another Glock. I don't know why, but I guess that's besides the point. All my others have run pretty darn well. Um, yeah, Gen 3.
Yeah, and
Iconic. It's an iconic Glock generation there.
probably the best finish as far as the slide is concerned.
Certainly, the old the Tenefer.
And well, how many rounds do you think it took? I want to get into, round count because that's kind of important, but more specifically, what kind of drills would you recommend people run? Obviously, get training, get a coach, things like that. But if someone can't afford to do that, what are some things with just a gun and holster and enough magazines to run a 30 round stage. What kind of drills, not just dry fire, but what should people do just to kind of get going a little bit?
Yeah, it depends on the facilities you have to work with. I mean, if you have a place where you can set up three different targets, I mean, there's a lot you can do with three targets to get yourself, somewhat prepared for target transitions. But I mean, really, for the average person, I mean, shooting accurately, that's just where you need to start. I mean, go shoot groups of 10, 15, 20, 25. If you can get farther than that, shoot groups at that distance. Don't even worry about the timer at first. It's way easier to learn speed later on, in my opinion. Um,
Yeah, slow, smooth, smooth as fast. If you hop on a timer right off the bat, you're going to build a pretty weak foundation, and it's going to be
it,
pretty rocky for you to come back from that.
you good with static range and you shoot groups and you get pretty good at it, and you go home and you dry fire and you learn how to draw, you learn how to reload, and you can teach yourself that. The gun handling skills. You can learn all that in dry fire, but if you go to a range, just shoot groups. Go
Okay. Just try to get as close as you can to the last round. And then,
learn to see. You're teaching yourself to see. The point is not to shoot slow. The point is to train your eyes, to see the sights lift, to be able to call the shots, to be able to say, oh, yeah, that was good. That's a nice group. Oh, yeah, fuck me. Through it. Once you can tell the difference, it just doesn't feel like recoil and loud bangs. That's when you're learning. I mean, you have to learn to see. And that's what shooting groups will teach you. It's not just for the sake of shooting groups, don't shoot slow for the sake of shooting slow. I mean, you guys learn to see it. Once you see it, you can learn the other gun handling skills and dry fire, and hopefully you have a range where you can set your own stuff up, and then you can practice other drills. There are books on it. You get Ben Stoker's books are excellent as far as little drills, but it's hard to self-correct if you don't know what you're doing, right?
yeah.
So I stand by it. Even if you can only afford, a 1 day lesson of someone, you should just do it anyway. It's the cost of a gun, but you'll pay it yourself back and all the ammo savings that you didn't waste. So
And
good help.
how far in was it before you started reloading? Because that's pretty common
Mm-hmm.
for folks that shoot competitions. Most, I would say most of them reload and they make their own ammo. How far in were you before you started reloading your own?
Oh, probably 2 years. No, less than that. Maybe a year. Yeah, about a year. Yeah, I started out. I mean, even that was a learning curve. Heck, I mean, frankly, it's almost a moot point nowadays. I would just tell someone just to go buy the ammo factory because you can't get. I mean, you don't really save money.
It takes a long time to be able to recoup.
Oh, it sure does when primers are 10 cents each. I mean, it's half the price of the cartridge. I
Yeah, in
mean,
my
if
mind, I'm still in 2014.
this was 2014, yeah, go reload. Nowadays, forget it. I reload because I already have a lot of the components, so it'd be stupid for me not to because I have it. But for the irritation involved and the cost of getting it up and going, I would just tell you just to go buy factory ammo and forget about it.
Yeah, I shoot the Federal 150 grain Syntec, so those are pretty good rounds.
Yeah, they're fun.
Shoot. Mm,
I mean, I'm a precision Delta man myself as far as projectiles go.
So how many rounds do you think it took? What was the timeline to go from novice shooting the 40 to, let's say, master? And how if you break it down, was it easier to get to master from unclassified to master, or and then how's that compared to master to grandmaster? Like what's what's it take to get that level of separation from the rest of the folks?
Well, I thought master was easy. And I don't even feel like I'm, gloating or anything when I say that. I mean, honestly, I think if you just have a good grasp of your fundamentals, I think it's almost automatic. At least it used to be. Classifiers are a little harder now, but my initial class was C class, and don't quote me, I'd have to go look it up, but I believe after my initial class is C, I believe I was M within 6 months. It was less than a year. And I found that, actually, I went from C to M directly, and there was no BA class. I was C class, and my next class was master class. I went to a match and someone was giving me hard times. I thought I was sandbagging at other matches, and I had to tell them, no, man, it was one update.
I wouldn't
Uh,
know anything about sandbagging.
yeah, yeah. So, if you have a coach and you can practice and you go shoot, a few hundred rounds a week, um, I think master should be almost automatic, really, if you care at all. Um, Now GM was much harder. At that point, not only do you almost have to shoot perfectly, but and I never shot perfectly, right? So for me, it was almost shooting out of control to get to that level. Sticking you weren't out of control. It's just it could feel like that sometimes. How fast you have to go. It's very mental at that point in the game. Everything has to be loose. Your little gun handling drills, all that those skills, they have to be perfect. And then you
Yep.
just got to push a little faster too. Some people who are better than me, maybe they don't have to shoot on that edge right there. Maybe they don't. I did. I would say that they're really good natural GM shooters who probably don't have to shoot on the edge of whatever. But it just depends on you as a shooter and how far you want to go, how far you want to take it. Um, I don't
And
know.
and for those that have never seen the sport, heard of the sport, shot the sport, the target is, silhouette of, I don't know, average size person's chest, would you say?
I would say so.
And there's the A zone, the alpha zone, which is in the center. Then does it go to Charlie on USPSA and then Delta?
Alpha Charlie Delta. And there
Yeah.
used to be there used to be a Bravo zone in the upper, but or
Yeah.
is it all? Oh shit, I don't even know.
Yeah. It goes to show you
What did they get rid of?
was
They
it
got rid
you?
of didn't they?
Which one?
Bravo. Now it's
Yeah. Yeah,
Charlie.
there's no Bravo anymore, I guess. But
Oh,
maybe I'm probably getting it mixed up with IDPA too, since we went that far back.
I don't know.
But it's average size chest, so you're getting shots on target. And then there are the IPSC targets. Do they use those in USPSA sanction matches? The
Sanction matches? I don't think so. Maybe
yeah,
they.
because there's another shooting sport competition, IPSC,
Mhm.
uh, which you shot some IPSC as well, right?
I did a little bit. Shot a world shoot and IPSC Nationals. Oh, that might be it. I like
You
IPSC.
can give us just a broad overview of your achievements and some stories from your travels all around the country, because I want to get into your travels after you kind of retired from
Hmm.
USPSA. But tell us about what it's like to just get out there and hit the road for matches.
Oh, geez.
I know it's been a
Hey,
little while,
it's
so
been a little while. I always call myself second place Alex. I never did super well. I took me years to win a state match, and but the thing is, I usually made it to the podium at smaller matches, so that
Yep.
was cool. Um, I felt good about that at the time. Meant a lot to me. Nationally, yeah, so, never that good. I had one second place finish at Steel Challenge Nationals almost 10 years ago now. It's probably the best I ever placed at a major match.
And how far from your home base did you ever go shoot a match? Did you shoot out in Arizona? before
Mhm.
before you moved out there? Where else did you get to go?
Oh, geez. I traveled through a lot of the South, Midwest. Um, Shot a few matches out west, up in Utah, not just Arizona. Um, but I used to travel a fair amount. I used to shoot probably, 9 major matches a year, give or take. I was lucky because Florida, I didn't really have to travel that far. We had so many here.
Yeah,
Um, it's a great state for the shooting sports.
that it is. I mean, we
That's
have
South Florida specifically, but the rest of it's pretty darn good.
yeah, Frostproof, Volusia. Uh, yeah, there's quite a few decent gun ranges, and there's a website for those of you that want to get into this. You could get a membership to USPSA. I would recommend getting that because you can kind of help support the sport. And we probably should have looked into some of the data as far as how many people are shooting, how many people are aging out, things like that. Have you seen anything recently as far as just membership, how membership is going?
I haven't really followed it much, to be honest. I know that everything took a hit because of COVID and the ammunition crisis, the primer crisis. Um, you're going to lose members if you can't shoot.
Yeah,
And
and
I would say, frankly, the sport it's a middle age hobby.
yeah.
Candidly speaking, a bunch of we were fat fucks out there. Um, I don't know. What would you do? You gonna pay 15 cents for a primer, or you gonna play golf?
Yeah, but we kind of been skirting around it. There are long guns, in Steel Challenge you can shoot a 22 long rifle. So you can really get into the sport almost with any firearm nowadays. Now, when we shot, pistol, caliber carbines, rifles, things of that nature
Mhm.
weren't weren't very common. But now, if we kind of look into it a little bit, you know, it's it's changed the sport. I don't know if it's the most convenient thing for the folks that shoot handgun primarily,
It
but
slows.
and then like you were saying earlier, the whole red dot phase with carry optics, the sport has changed since,
Oh yeah.
we used to shoot,
Oh
pretty
yeah.
often.
Oh, it's hugely different. It's hugely different. Yeah, everyone shoots a dot now. Personally, I think that's a little bit silly for most handgun distant targets, especially but that's whatever.
Yeah, it was
People,
a little inconvenient the last match we shot when we had to stop when it was raining because people were getting raindrops on their optics and couldn't see.
yeah, some of that's people not knowing how to run them, right?
Yeah.
You have a hard target focus that shouldn't matter, but some people it really bothers them. So is what it is. You don't have that issue of iron sights in the rain, do you?
Yeah.
Um,
And what would you say the biggest misconception is in just shooting in general, as far as, looking at the sight or how you pull the trigger? Which do you think is a bigger misconception, and what do you think people have troubles with or mistakenly do the most?
well, your sight picture, I believe, is dictated to by your target. You know the, the probability of your target will determine whether you have a hard sight focus on your front sight or if you have a hard target focus, right? You're shooting the target 5 yards, look at the target and let it rip, grip it hard, have a good index. You shouldn't really need to stare at the front sight. And at that range, you should be shooting so fast, you wouldn't be able to have a perfect sight picture anyway. It should be a flash of sight in your peripheral at that distance. You go out to 25 yards or targets of no shoots on them, or little pieces of steel like little poppers, you probably do want to have a hard sight focus, see a sharp edge.
Yeah.
Some people will tell you just to have a target sight focus all the time. It's very in vogue lately.
And that just comes with repetition, especially,
It's all
with
about
these.
index, frankly.
Yeah.
I
Index.
still think, switching back and forth is the best way to do it, which is how it was taught for a long time. Your eyes snap to the target, depending on how hard that target is to shoot. You'll either keep your eyes on the target or they'll switch back to the front sight. And it sounds complicated, but it's not. Just you get used to it.
Yeah,
It's subconscious.
yeah, that's why transition drills are really important, and then especially shooting on the move, it's difficult, but with more repetition, it becomes almost natural. And a lot of people, when they're starting off, or even throughout the years, they will run, stop, and shoot like they're shooting at a static range almost,
Yeah.
especially with red dots, which is odd. So there's, it
Well,
just takes repetition.
that's not going to make you a better shooter. And back to what we were saying before, the gun doesn't make you a better shooter either.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah, because you.
long story short, just on that conversation, I went to the SVIs. I love them. They're my favorite guns I own. Build quality is amazing. I started shooting a Gen 5 34 just for kicks, all stock. Although I did drop in a Glock Performance trigger, which is still OEM.
Yeah.
You know what? On a timer, I shoot them about the same.
Yeah.
So I don't know what that tells you.
Well, you don't have to have the most expensive gun. We joke about whoever has the most money, does the best. It does help, obviously if you get a Glock, it's always best to change out the sights. We run Savigny.
Yeah, no one's shooting anything stock for sure.
Yeah.
You gotta do the sights. The sights and the trigger, but really, the sights are more important in my opinion. But
Yes. And really, people do the trigger jobs. You mentioned the Glock Performance trigger for the Gen 5, which is really good. I mean, that's a major improvement
mhm.
to say the stock Gen 4 trigger, which we won't really talk about the Gen 4s too much, but the Gen 3 triggers, I could get them pretty good. You could get them pretty good. Terran Tactical, did a pretty good trigger job before they went to the Timney trigger.
Mhm.
But sights is the first thing to do, maybe trigger, but the most important thing you can buy for proficiency is ammo. I would say ammo.
Yeah, ammo, but sights.
Yeah.
You need thinner sights. Everyone needs thinner sights. People who think they can't shoot irons just need to try sights that are thinner. I swear to God, it
Yeah.
makes the world of difference.
And then maybe cheat with a little bit of a fiber optic in there.
I
That's
shoot
cheating. Yeah.
bleeds black.
Yeah, I'm just too lazy to put it in.
Black
So
target. Look at the front edge. That's all you need.
yeah. And when we say, fiber optic, there's your front sight, typically they're white from the factory, but you can, when you go to an aftermarket site, you can typically see a little hole in there, put a little bright fiber optic, sun hits it, makes it brighter, easier to see. So you
Mhm.
left your SVs in the gun safe, and when we got back into it, we were both shooting Gen 3 Glock 34s. You made the switch to Gen 5, and like you said, you can shoot that just about as fast as you can the SVs. So
Yeah, maybe a little less accurately at distance, but it doesn't have that perfect, slightly rolling, less than a 2 pound single action trigger. So hard to compete with that. But if you do your part, it's fine. Everything out, frankly, to 25 yards, it's fine. Gen 5 Glocks, everyone's sleeping on them. It's the best Glock that's ever been made. They shoot great. The engineering, outstanding. It's the first Glock I ever bought where I can say that, with the exception of the sights, I have all stock parts with no polishing, no springs that are aftermarket. The gun just runs and it runs and it runs. And it's easy to shoot. It's accurate. It's so much more accurate. Well, not so much more. It's more accurate than the old
Yeah.
one. It's everyone's sleeping on it, man. Everyone's sleeping on it.
Yeah, and as far as I agree, the sights are really and even the stock trigger in the Gen 5 is
Acceptable. You can
superior. Yeah.
it's an improvement. They improved on the old triggers for sure. I mean, you could frankly just, if you just change the sights out, you could take it out and shoot it at a match, it'd be fine.
Yeah, I mean, the only gripe I have with the Gen 5 is the slide finish. But other than that,
It's okay.
it's
It's
yeah,
still it's better than the Gen 4 finish. It's which is also on the new Gen 3s. Doesn't
yeah,
scratch, doesn't scratch and scuff like it used to.
yeah.
Um,
And when I say gripe, it's not a major gripe. The only issue I've ever had, shooting a Glock 26 out at the range, sweaty hands. That's the only time I've ever had an issue with it, which Glock 26 is a subcompact and you compress, you know, that much of a recoil spring down to that size, it could be a little bit tough. But other than that, I mean, they're
that's
pretty solid.
why the new ones have the forward cocking serrations. They
That
take
they do. That they do. And
There's
yeah.
no better value in a gun. If you're watching this, and I can't believe that you are, buy a Gen 5 Glock.
Yeah, and you could call us Glock fanboys. I don't care. I started off as a SIG fanboy,
Mhm.
but that's when the hammerfire double action, single action SIGs were more prominent before the P320 came out.
Mhm.
But you know, I've seen them fail in matches. I know you've seen an M&P fail in matches because we just saw it at our last match. He couldn't get his gun to run, and I went up to him at the end, and I'm like, yeah, you really should probably trade that for a Glock.
Mhm.
But
Well, that's what people don't get, man. Everyone has their issue with the Glocks. They look at they say, "Oh, well, it doesn't fit me. The grip angle's too funky. Whatever. It doesn't fit me. It doesn't fit my hand. Triggers bad." People just don't understand that you have to grip Glocks differently. You cannot grip them like a monkey. You have to use a pinch grip. You have to have all the pressure on the top web of your palm, of your index finger and your thumb, and then all the other pressure is going to be, cranking down. It's going to be on the bottom of the gun. You don't just grip straight like you're making a fist. It's about leverage with the Glock grip angle, and you can get so deep on a Glock, and you can put so much leverage on a Glock that even though they're lighter than everything else, sometimes by 20 something ounces, whatever, call them 20, 26, 28 ounce guns when there are CZs running around that are closing in on 60, you can shoot them just as flat with less muzzle dip because of the leverage you get on them if you grip them correctly. And it takes practice because it's not natural, it's an acquired skill.
it
It's not like
is,
gripping a 1911 like you're making a fist, you know? It's about
yeah,
leverage fingers.
and kind of just to make it a little easier to understand for folks that are new to it. When he's talking about leverage, picture a line coming out of the barrel of a handgun, and you have the barrel at the front, obviously you have the grip at the back. How high can you get your hand to the line? Picture a line coming out of the barrel and out the back of the gun. How high can you get your hand up closer to that bore axis, they call it? So if you pick up, like, I can't bash SIG because of the P226, the P229. I carried a P226 at work. I would trust it with my life. But when it comes down to, well, especially in a duty belt, that 10 ounces makes a difference. But I would still, I love the P226, 229. But when you start talking about striker fired pistols, it's all personal preference. But that bore axis, on a SIG, like you was saying earlier, you're gripping it different. It takes time, but just from our personal experience, it's worked, and you can't call us Glock fanboys because I started off as a Sig fanboy. You started off as
I mean,
MEP.
I started with Glocks, but I wanted to like other things. I ended up with $6,500 handguns. And I'm telling you, all you need is a Glock, and you can shoot it really well. And you don't even need to go to other companies anymore. I mean, just get all your parts from Glock, other than your sights. It's
Yeah.
fine. It's not holding you back. It's never going to hold you back. If you want to put a dot on there, shoot carry optics or limited optics, you can do that too. You don't need a 2011.
Yeah. And when we're talking,
You're on. I love 2011s.
yeah.
I have seven 2011s. My SV 2011s. They're my favorite guns I own. They are so easy to shoot. They're hilarious.
Yeah.
I don't
And
think I don't think you need to spend $6,500 and wait 15 months to shoot well. I mean, it's all about the shooter, and what can I say?
yeah, and the new Glock 34, you got it to test it as far as, the recoil assembly, how that would do at, shooting at your standards. And then when we talk about the Glock 34, or Glock 17, Glock 22, like he said earlier, the SIG P226, those are the 17, the 22, those are basically, think of what a law enforcement officer carries. They'll typically carry that size gun. The Glock 34 is the same, basically the same. Well, it is the same frame, just with a little bit longer slide, a little bit longer barrel. And now the Gen 5s have the optic cut that you can, like you were saying, put a red dot on there. Really, all we need is Dave to make a rear sight.
Yeah, we'll keep working on them. Well, then, substitute.
Maybe he'll be the fourth person to listen to the pod.
Oh, there's a third. This is the weirdest fishing podcast I've ever been on. Let me tell you.
Well, going back to that, we called it the Wet Work Podcast because we wanted to talk about more than just fishing. This is the second episode, which I have to give you credit for the Wet Work, not only the Wet Work Podcast, but the Wet Work collection. We were talking about that, and we'll go over that a little bit. So when I said in the first podcast, my buddy helped come up with, the DNC camo pattern, which is, for those of you that don't know, DNC stands for Desert Night Camo, which maybe Alex could go into the history of that a little bit if he wants to. But we were talking about, guy stuff. We came up with Wet Work because we do shoot. We fish. Alex fishes sometimes. If I can get him close to a body of water, which is difficult, but I still don't know if he can swim. We've known each other a decade, but
I like the land.
yeah.
Land lover.
But Alex did help me come up with the Wet Work Podcast because it's, kind of a play on words. We can talk about all sorts of things on the podcast, but, fishing, water, working, wet water, working,
It's
spies,
fish.
assessing.
It's fish stuff for gun people.
Yeah.
That's what the company is.
Yes.
We're shooters.
We're shooters with a fishing company. Yeah. Yeah, and I gotta kind of attribute some of it to Bass Assassin because some distant relatives of mine own the company, so we're talking assassin, spies, guy stuff. What if we call it the Wet Work Podcast?
Mm-hmm.
Assassinating fish and only fish. But we mentioned the DNC, so why don't you give us a little bit of a background on the DNC?
This a little quickie here.
Yeah.
Don't quote me on it, but I believe it was developed in the late 70s, early 80s to be a camouflage that would be effective against Soviet night vision, and
Obviously in the desert,
it
first of
has
all.
some, yeah, well, no, earlier than that. It has some spooky connotations, if you will, just because of who used it. I think ultimately, a lot of people used it, especially around the Gulf War time, just because it looked cool.
Yeah.
Because it looks sick.
Which we
That's
do have some,
why
we
we
do
like
have,
it.
yeah, we do have some
Yeah.
kind of retro camos in there just to
Yeah,
kind of,
it's a retro camo. It was made to defeat early Soviet night vision. It didn't defeat it for long. It stayed around longer than it should because it looks really cool.
thank you,
Uh,
Watches of Espionage, as well, for helping bring it back.
he
Which,
brought it back almost single-handedly.
yeah, which we did get our DNC watch straps
Of
very
course.
recently. So so we talked about shooting. I want to talk about some of your travels out west and some of your camping adventures, and then we'll wrap it up after that. But you did leave Florida. You left for quite some time. You
Good.
moved out to Arizona
Yeah,
and South Arizona in the valley around Phoenix, and then northern Arizona.
yeah, yeah.
And
I lived in Scottsdale for a time, enjoyed living there, but I ended up moving to northern Arizona, Grand Canyon region, Flagstaff, highest point in Arizona, Mount Humphreys, and Flagstaff is at a little bit over 7,000 feet above sea level. So it's a four-season town. I mean, heck, almost really two seasons. It's beautiful, and then it's cold enough it could snow at any moment. Um, and yeah, for about 6 months out of the year, it will. So yeah, no, I loved living out there. I used to go overlanding all the time in my Toyota trucks and camping almost every weekend. Wow, what a place to live. Great place. Shooting sports were so-so up there. That's okay. You know, people move to the west for the landscapes, and that's why I moved there too. And the
yeah.
landscapes were breathtaking. I went on many adventures to Moab, Northern the Grand Canyon, so many little places in northern Arizona that are, a little bit off the grid, you could say.
And you had your dedicated Forerunner,
Hmm.
but it was essentially stock, still stock. I mean, you put a little bit taller tire on it, and you're it's kind of a testament to the Toyota Forerunner.
Dock tire, actually. Yeah, the only thing I ever did to it, I replaced the shocks when they went bad with a pair of Bilsteins and set of Bilsteins, I should say. And it taught me to be a better off-roader. I mean, it taught me great tire placement, taught me how to get out of tricky situations. I mean, obviously I wasn't rock crawling in the thing, but I went places, if people saw them, they would say, there's no way that 400 can go there. And people in, rigged out Jeeps, and they would laugh at me whenever I was going by, but I always got down. No matter if I was in the Rockies in Colorado on, advanced trails or whatever, it got me everywhere I wanted to go. Never gave me an issue. It's the best truck I ever owned.
And what
The
kind
only
of
made in Japan.
what kind of what kind of gear did you carry as far as, I mean, your tires, what kind of medical equipment, get you out of
Oh,
equipment,
Nito Terra
tents?
Grapplers. Nito Terra Grapplers, great tire, LT rated. It's their nice, thick, hard plied tires. Don't get punctured in rocks. Well, other than that, what I do, I had a pair of recovery boards. I used to carry, four of those around. Only had to use them once, believe it or not, and some really loose sand in Utah. That was a day, let me tell you. Um, as far as medical kits go, I would just take the kit out of my range bag. It's pretty standard, cat tourniquet, um, Israeli bandage, quick clot. But, more than that, Neosporin and band-aids, the stupid little first aid things that you use on a regular basis.
Yeah.
Um, as far as camping gear went, I was always a big fan of REI tents. Forgive their politics, it's great gear. It's best value, I would have to say, in camping gear, really. Um, and yeah,
It's funny. My truck was never really a complete overlanding rig like you see on Instagram or
Yeah.
whatever. It's all fairly stock. I mean,
Yep.
I never had gas cans. I mean, I've never been in a situation where I needed to have a gas can. I mean, there's only so far in the continental United States you can go without finding a gas station. I mean, really. I mean, don't be stupid about it.
Those mall parking lots are pretty large nowadays.
Yeah, I mean, you're going to go on a 60-mile, one-way road. I mean, yeah, if you go fill up on the way out of town. I mean, geez, it's not that hard. I mean, there's nowhere I can think of in the continental United States where you can't find a gas station within the 350-mile range of a 4 hour. So your mileage may vary. Just don't be stupid, fill up.
So you had the boards
Mhm.
and the tents. What kind of a tent setup did you use as far as tents? And not only that, what are like some of the absolute necessities that people should take if they want to go overlanding and camp along the way and things like
Well,
that? Obviously, toilet paper. That's a big one to have.
toilet paper. I mean, I got one of those, like a Home Depot bucket, one of those seats on it, and you get the
Yeah.
little bag, it's disposable. Got the little, I don't know, that powder shit in it, and
Yeah.
you wrap it up, it doesn't smell or anything. It's nice. I mean, you can dig a hole too, but that's way too much work.
Yep.
Um, hey man, it's leave no trace, right? It's
Yep.
also lazier. It's-
Well, but that's also the nice thing about out west is the land out there, you can actually use it for what
yeah,
it's intended for, unlike Florida.
you have freedom there, federal land. It's fantastic. You want to go on a trail, you want to go camp at a random spot, dispersed camping's okay. You can do that. The only trouble I ever ran into were sometimes you had fire restrictions, and there are ways to get around that. I used to have a propane fire pit that I would bring with me, and you just plug it into a standard 20-gallon propane tank. That thing would burn for 2 days. It was fine. It was no big deal.
Unless I was there, it would blow up. But
Yeah, there's no
that's
question
a
about that.
story
That's
that
another story.
yeah, for another day.
Yeah, weird things happen to Bryce. He should definitely not go on sub expeditions to see the or anything. Terrible things would happen.
That is yeah, that's a rough one, but it's weird. We talked about this the other day on another episode. It's it's weird. When it first came up, I thought it was a meme, and I'm like, why are people making memes about the second Titanic and stuff? But then I found out it's real. I'm like, oh,
Yeah.
that is pretty bad. But as far as tent setup, what kind of a tent and sleeping bag? How were those
Well,
arranged?
I used to like my REI tents. I mean,
Yeah.
they're for as far as value. I would always do a 4-person or 3-person tent. Two people in gear. Fills it up. As far as mattresses go, I had an X-bed pad, which was it was you blow it up by hand, a little hand pump sort of thing. Very comfortable, fantastic, great camping tent. Um, if you have a way to blow it up a little bit easier, I would just advise that if you're car camping. But yeah, X-bed mat's excellent, excellent, and it's your standard stuff. I mean, you need your lanterns, you need your camping table, you need a foldable chair. I like the foldable lounge chairs personally, fit 2 people on it. You and me, maybe snuggle. And yeah, as far as food goes, I mean, I like Mountain House freeze dried meals,
Yeah.
little propane stove to boil some water. I always bring my water. I was never brave enough to try water out west because most of the places that you'd camp, let me tell you, they weren't the high Rockies. You weren't Jeremiah Johnson out there in a nice stream. I mean, it was, if there was any water, it was suspect for sure. Cattle droppings, and you just didn't want to do it. Bring your own water,
Bring enough water for more than you need.
definitely, definitely, definitely. I always just have a satellite phone too, Iridium satellite phone. I recommend one. It gave me so much courage to do things I otherwise would not have done, because I knew I could get help if I needed it. Maybe
Yeah.
that's the way to look at it. But an Iridium satellite phone, that's what you should definitely have if you're like serious about going deep.
Yeah, and what is it? The is it Garmin that makes the InReach? I've heard those
I
haven't
never
tried
used them.
one. Yeah, I've heard good things about those, so that would be something to consider as well. Probably a little bit cheaper.
Probably the Iridium satellite phones. It's that's pretty standard. I mean, those have been used all over the world, in war zones. I mean, they're great. Sometimes they're a little finicky. Pretty sure I was trying to call my fiance once, and I called some guy in Nigeria, and I called him like three times, coming at me, and it was a weird thing. A little bit of a learning curve there. Um,
Were you the American prince?
yeah, right.
So
Trying to
out
get.
of so out of all the places you went to, if you were to tell the folks listening, you know, best places to go, obviously Moab, and you actually gave the rights to one of your photos. Was it in Moab
I
to
was in.
Toyota? So
Yeah,
you gave the rights to the photo to Toyota of your Forerunner.
Toyota asked for it specifically because I won a customer photo contest once. They wanted to use it for marketing purposes. I don't know if they ever did or not, and I never saw it myself. But
Well, it's pretty safe with Toyota. They're like, all right, this is a fifth gen, so we can use this for the next decade.
yeah, it had the wrong
Uh,
phone, so can I say?
yeah.
Yeah, Toyota, great company. Go with the Japanese ones.
Yeah.
Uh,
Which we'll see what comes out. We got the Lexus GX.
so where would I recommend? Would you tell everyone your favorite fishing spots?
No.
I I had some places and I loved them because people didn't know where they were. Places
Yeah.
that weren't inaccessible. They were just a little bit inconvenient.
Yeah.
And that was half of the appeal for me. But, it's something to be said when you can find a place where you can go camp under beautiful aspen groves and if you have running water, that's great. Cool rock formation going, an interesting canyon where your only canyon buddy's a mountain lion who's, in his den not too far up the way. And those are cool places. I mean, you just gotta go look, gotta explore. It's very important, I think, too. This is key. You need to have some sort of GPS system in a program like Gaia, or
Hmm.
there are a few others, but you need to see land ownership on it because people don't realize that Forest Service boundaries and BLM land, I mean, it is a absolute checkerboard out there, and you got to know where you are. It's real easy to be on private land. It's real easy to end up on reservation land. You don't want any of those things, right?
Yeah,
Uh,
especially if you have a firearm as well.
especially, don't want to go camping on a reservation with the firearm. It's generally frowned upon in most reservations, but so just be mindful of that. I think that's important, and the quality of your GPS too. I mean, it'll show you different roads and fire roads and little subsurface roads. It's immensely helpful. Recommend investing in that.
And before we sign off, is there anything else as far as overlanding, as far as safety, convenience, anything else you could think of as far as going out west? And then maybe we'll talk about one of your stories if you think we're allowed to about the roost.
Oh, yeah. Well, we'll save that for another time. But
Okay.
gotta leave them something.
Yeah.
Um, just tell people where you're going.
Yeah.
Off the full tank of gas. Make sure you have your truck serviced. Don't go out there with a jalopy. You don't want to be stranded. Remember, when you're out there, especially out west, right? I mean, Grand Canyon region, especially. I mean, you're on your own. I mean, you can't count on seeing someone else show up. And Moab would be fine, right? There are so many jeeps going through there, it's whatever. But
Yeah.
other places, there is no one to help you but yourself. So make sure you can help yourself. Make sure you're able to change a tire. I used to have an air jack. Nice wrenches and lug tools. I mean, just make it easy for yourself.
Yeah. The
You need the
best.
confidence it has to be.
Yeah, the best. Well, patch kits if you need it. The best,
Yeah, patch kit, an ARB patch kit. I mean, I had one of those on board all the time. I mean, an air compressor. I mean, You don't have to prepare for every eventuality because you can't. Just
Yep.
the things that you can control, control them.
Yep. You're using your tires the whole entire time, obviously. So
Yeah, right, right. I mean, if you blow your transmission or something, well, guess what? You have a satellite phone and you already pre-programmed the local towing guy. So, and believe it or not, in every region, there's at least one guy who specializes in off-road recovery because people get stranded all the time out there. There's nowhere that rural anymore.
oh, maybe we should go into that. The
Oh,
fishing
looks
account
like a
doesn't work
riot. We
out.
should tow like hell.
Yeah. All right, Mr. Alex. Well, thank you very much for taking time out of your day to teach us about some hopefully helpful tips about shooting and overland stuff and camping and going out west and having fun. So thank you very much.
You're welcome, pal. Thank you. And I'll see you next time, my friend.
Absolutely. Well, thank you, sir. And well, if anyone listened to this, thank you for listening. Stay tuned. We'll probably have some more stuff. We will have some more fishing stuff soon. So we got a lot of interesting guests lined up. And yeah, we'll definitely shout those out when they're going to be coming up. We're going to have some really cool stuff coming up. So thanks, everyone. And until next time, I hope you have tight lines. And remember, fish like hell.